thank you all for being here, and thank you for the organizers for this great conference. I'm really enjoying all the talks and the great presentations. So I'm a linguist working at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History. And today I'm going to talk about one of my ongoing projects, and it's about the meanings of body part terms. Let me just quickly introduce the topic or the notion of colexification. If you're not familiar with it yet, you probably have heard terms like polysemy, ambiguity, or vagueness. So this can be grouped into colexification, and we have that across languages, where we have languages that use the same term for different objects or different concepts. So we have a house and a family that can be referred to with uta in Aymara, or we have wood and tree, which can be referred to with tre in Fauis, and then we have water and river in Maori being vai. And if you check out this reference, you will find why we chose to use this word instead of polysemy. Today we are going to, or I'm going to talk about one specific type of colexification, and this is between body parts and object parts. So here's one example from Burmese, where we use head, our body part term head, to refer to the roof of a house. And these are interesting for many different reasons, but one of them is also connected to the salience of body parts. So most studies that we find which look at this data cross-linguistically are focusing on how the body is divided into parts and how it is divided into, specifically the parts are labeled with linguistic units. And some of the features that body parts have seem to be more prominent in the way we categorize or partition the body into labels. And one of the features is round and long, which is or seems to be particularly salient. And then we have functional significance, which is involved in part naming and object categorization, and also visual discontinuities play a role in segmenting the body into parts. As of yet, there hasn't been any systematic study on this colexification I'm interested in. So terms like head for roof hasn't been studied systematically yet. And I would like to, look at it a little bit more closely. There are studies on specific languages. So for example, Levinson had a great study on Tseltal, which is a language that uses body part terms quite frequently and very systematically. And for example, you use the word nose to refer to other body parts or to other shapes, object shapes that have similar shape to the nose. So this is something that happens in other languages. And I looked at this from a cross-linguistic perspective in a study that I did for my master thesis, where I had body part, object part colexifications in 13 different languages. I used a set of those body part colexifications, created pictures of them, and then asked my participants whether or not they could refer to a certain object part with a body part. And what you can see here is that certain particular body part colexifications seem to occur more frequently. So leg of the table, leg of the chair, and leg of the bed is present in all languages of my small sample. And then we have sawtooth and mouth of the bottle, which is the upper part of the bottle, is also quite frequent. But most of this type of body part colexifications aren't that frequent across languages, it seems. So we have hand of bananas for a bunch of bananas. We have foot of a valley for the bottom of a valley, and head of the house for the roof, which are only or were only present in my sample in one language. So the aim of this present study is to extend this approach and look at these body part, object part colexifications across the languages of the world to test hypotheses of salience of body parts and identify cross-linguistic patterns of colexification. The research questions I'm going to focus on today are these two. So are terms for salient body parts more frequently colexified, and do certain body part, object part colexifications have different frequencies? The hypotheses are based on the things that I found already in my master thesis and the knowledge that I got from the literature. So outer body parts, meaning head, eye, and arm, are more frequently colexified than inner body parts, such as heart or liver. And most colexifications occur in one language family, whereas only a few colexifications appear in several language families. The data I'm going to use, and some of you might be familiar with it, it's the CLICS database, the database of cross-linguistic colexification. This database includes colexifications of about 3,000 concepts across 3,000 languages. It's really available, and you can use it. Basically, you can download it. And I'm not going to get into any details. If you want to know more about it, just ask me afterwards or in the Slack channel. The database, the languages are distributed across the world. As you can see here, we have the language families, the most prominent ones. Most of the others are grouped into other. These are language families where you only have 1 or 2 languages. And you can see that the distribution it's good, it's not perfect. We don't have perfect typological data, but still it's a good way to start off. The data is structured in a network, and you can see here that, for example, for the subgraph tooth, we can already see that there are certain objects that colexify with tooth, for example, egg. Here is the node and the edges, so the lines between the concepts indicate how often this concept is colexified. So the thickness of the lines indicate that, for example, seed and grain seem to be colexified more frequently than, for example, tooth and egg. For the present study, I used, adjusted the CLICS data set because the threshold within everything that is on the web page, for example, is with a threshold of 3 language families. I lowered that threshold so that it also includes all the colexifications which are present in only 1 language family. And I only looked at this subset of colexifications of body part and object part. Here are the results. So I used a list of 137 human body parts. I excluded all the animal body parts. So it's just body parts that are referring to our body parts, and 1,071 object parts. These include either an object, as in the example of egg, or parts like the tip of an object, for example. They come from different categories, so tools, food, landscape, plants, and so on. And if we then combine or look at the colexifications, I found that there were 1,719 body part, object part colexifications, meaning that there is a body part and it's colexified with an object part. These are the frequencies of the body parts. So what we can see here is that there are definitely body parts that are most frequently colexified with body parts. I chose to include only the 10 most frequent. And here is head on the first place. So how you would read it is that the head is colexified with 56 objects or object parts, then arm, then tooth. Tooth could also be grouped as an inner body part, but because it is visually accessible, we smile, we talk, and you see the tooth. I grouped it as an inner body part, but one exception is the bone, where we have a lot of colexifications with objects, although it's an inner body part. This is the example of the subgraph of head in the CLICS database. We see here not all the colexifications because this would be a bit too much, but still we have the subset of some of the colexifications, and we see that first of all, not only object parts are colexified with head, but if we look at here, it's egg, for example, so the shape of the head seems to give rise to this colexification, or also the spatial alignment. So the tip of an object can be the head or the top or the roof, which are the upper parts of objects. If we then look at how many colexifications occur across language families, we see that most of the colexifications I found in my list, so of the 1,719 colexifications, most of them, or almost all of them, occur in only one language family. So these are very infrequent colexifications, but still they occur at least once in one language family, and some of them occur in 2 or 3 or 4. And what we are next going to look at is the right-hand tail of this graph with the most frequently colexified object and body parts. So we have here a list of the 10 most frequent body part object part colexifications. And what we can see here is that the most frequent one is skin and bark. This is represented, or this is commonly colexified in 49 language families, whereas then it drops down quite rapidly. So I would have expected a smoother drop, basically, of the number of language families, but then it rapidly drops into 17 language families for egg and testicles. We have color and neck and so on. So here you can also see that there are differences in the perceptual similarity that is used for using a body part for an object part. And some of the objects also reoccur. So color is either the throat or the neck. And yeah. Now looking at, because these frequencies do not show us the distribution of where these colexification can be found. And it could seem that there might be certain clusters, but if we then look at the data and look at it on a map, we might see certain clusters or patterns within certain areas, because of course these colexification could also be due to language contact. That's why I chose 3 different patterns or 3 different colexifications to show you today. So skin and bark is the most frequent one. And I have plotted the language families or the languages that use this colexification on this map. And we see certain clusters. So in Africa, we have a small cluster. We have here in Papua New Guinea, a small cluster. And also across Southeast America, but South America, sorry. So yeah, we see that it is distributed across the globe, which is interesting in itself. We have other patterns like head and roof, which are not that frequent, but still they occur across the globe, across language families. So these are 5 different language families that have this head roof colexification that indicate that it was independently evolved in those languages. And then we have also aerial patterns of, for example, nose and root, the colexification, which is only present in 3 language families in one small area. So this is a typical case for language contact, where the language family does not necessarily play a big role, but the languages are so closely together that we find this colexification in this area. Coming now to the conclusion and to the hypothesis I first set out to test. So outer body parts are colexified more frequently. There is one exception, at least in the most frequent colexification, which is bone. Interestingly, in the literature, we do not find that many references to skin as a body part, which is basically the case because if we are interested in the segmentation of body parts or the labeling of certain body parts, then skin is a continuous body part that is not that interesting. And certain results also support general assumption about common patterns of polysemy that we find in the literature. And for example, eye and seed are also a very frequent colexification. Then for the second hypothesis, most colexifications occur in one language family, whereas only a few colexifications appear in several language families. This was also the case. So as we have seen in this graph, it was that most body part, object part colexifications are specific to a particular language family and thus maybe based on genealogical relationships between languages. So this could be due to semantic change as well. And there are only a few, very few seemingly universal colexifications that we find across the globe, across several language families. And also what we need to keep in mind is that there are language independent colexifications, but they can either be distributed across the world or confined in one area. And this is something that we need to keep in mind if we think about cognitive principles that could give rise to a colexification like head and roof, for example. And we need to take into account that this could also be only due to language contact. Some limitations of the study. So we still need to explain language variation. And this is something that I always have in mind and look to the future that I need to do that because, and this is generally what we need to do because we also find references to the same object part with two different body parts depending on the language we look at. So we also find, for example, that nose can refer to the tip of an object, but there's also languages that use head for the tip of the object. So this might be due to preferences for perceptual or functional similarity and based on areal and genealogical relationships between the languages. And then this is also something that we need to keep in mind is that the CLIX3 database currently contains only a few partial colexifications. So the examples that I showed you at the beginning from my master thesis were mostly table leg and certain other partial colexification. And these are not yet included in the CLIX database. So that's why I would like to make like an outlook or the next steps. So I'm going to create a sub-CLIX4 with only body part, object part colexifications. The team of CLIX database curators is currently on the go and will include more data sets, refinement, and the Glottalog 4.4 into the CLIX database. So as I have said, we are releasing these databases regularly. So this will be an update and hopefully more, more data, more things that we can look out for. And then I would like to extract clusters from the sub-CLIX4 and possibly extend the data with partial colexifications. Matthias List is currently working on that, and he's going to create this CLIPS database, which then could be integrated into my study as well. With that, I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.